Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brother Garfield from the Brother Garfield podcast. I want to say it's a beautiful day today. We have an esteemed guest, Dr. Rita Lucarelli, and she's an Egyptologist. And before I do bring her up, let me bring up my partner, Brother Unk, one of the best interviewers out there.
What's going
Always
on,
bring him on
Garfield?
with
How
that
you doing?
How you doing today, my brother? But
Hey,
let me
how you
bring
doing?
on before I bring on Rita Lucarelli, let me just tell you who she is first. She's an associate professor of Egyptology in the Department of Middle Eastern Languages and Culture and the class of 1939 Chair of Undergraduate Education. She's the faculty curator of Egyptology at the Phoebe A. Hearst Museum of Anthropology and a fellow of the Digital Humanities at UC Berkeley. She's presently working at a project aiming at realizing 3D models of ancient Egyptian coffins, the Book of the Dead in 3D. She's also completing a new monograph on demonology in ancient Egypt entitled Agents of Punishment and Protection, Ancient Egypt Demonology in the First Millennium BC. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting to you, Rita Lucarelli. How are you doing today?
Hi everyone. I'm fine. How about you?
How you doing, Rita? How you
All right.
feeling?
Before we get into any question, Rita, what was it like for you before you got into scholarship as a teenager or as a young lady? What made you get into Egyptology?
Well, I started as an Arabist. I wanted to learn Arabic, and I was in this university in Italy where, indeed, you can study Arabic, but they also had courses of Egyptology, and I had a background anyway in Greek and Latin and the study of the past. I liked archaeology too, and so then I just went and attended a course of Egyptology, and that's where it all started. Then I kind of understood that being an Egyptologist for me would have meant to be able to keep learning about the modern Arabic cultures at the same time, learn about an ancient society that was so amazing for all the things already, monuments and texts and religion, and so then I fell in love with Egypt.
Okay.
But I believe that studying ancient Egypt also learns you to understand better modern Egypt and where they come from, despite the many things with the Arabs coming to Egypt, the culture changed. In fact, in modern Egypt, there is a lot of ancient Egypt still surviving. So it's a living society, I would say, what we see.
What was your parents' reaction to you getting into this type of studies?
They thought that probably would be difficult to find a job. So they were trying to say, oh, well, why don't you go and study Italian history or Greek and Latin? And, I was in Italy back then, so I could have been teaching in the school. But I wanted to follow my passion, and I never regretted it.
All right. So when you finally decided to study Egyptology, who were some of the scholars that you looked up to, that you admired, that you leaned on as far as getting into this field?
Well, at that time, I didn't have much choice, in the sense I had to study textbooks that were given to me by the professors, and those were this sort of old publications, also especially for the language. So they were mostly German. I had to learn German in order to be able even to look at these dictionaries. I did not create my own opinion about which Egyptologists to follow until probably I took my BA. And so when I started my PhD studies in the Netherlands, that's when I kind of started to learn more about Egyptology and different kind of Egyptologies. because different people indeed approach in a different way the old material. And my supervisor back then, Professor Borchhaus, he was an expert on magical text, and he's been a bit my muse in a sense, because he was the one who really was able to let those ancient texts speak to me. So I still remember these classes with him where he was performing the text. So it was not just reading and translating them, he was performing them. And
Wow.
we really understand that, these are not, it's nothing exotic or mysterious. These were voices of people who lived in the past. And so I was even more fascinated to try to understand them, right? And so that's what I've been trying to do. And these are the kind of Egyptologists I follow. So not just looking at Egypt as a land of queens and pharaoh, but a land of people. So how did these people been thinking about the world, and what did they find being right or wrong? How did they react to that, and what can we learn from it, right? So that's what I try to always do with my students, make those texts alive. Not only text, images, monuments, statues, whatever we have that we can use to understand them.
Okay. I see that you work a lot with like demonology and magic and those type of things out of ancient Egypt, and the beliefs of the life after death, and you specialize in these things. But before I ask you about those different issues you specialize in, what time period do you normally deal with? Do you deal with the old kingdom, the middle kingdom, or the new kingdom? Because I know when you have an edition of the Book of the Dead. You're part of the Book of the Dead project, which is, I gotta applaud you for that, by the way, too. And I gotta plug your book later on, the book where you edited. And I see you have something with the New Kingdom around the 10th century BC. So you seem to be touching all bases from the old to the New Kingdom. What do you normally specialize in as far as a time period?
So I do first millennium a lot. So it includes New Kingdom, but also later, the end of the Pharaonic period until the 30 dynasty, and then later Ptolemaic Egypt. But in fact, when you work on magical text, as I do, but not even magical text, in general, Egyptians, you cannot just work on text or objects of one period and not look at the earlier periods, because there's always some connections.
Correlation.
They were really concerned with continuing a tradition, transmitting knowledge. So in order to understand the text of the first millennium, I had to go back and look at the pyramid text. I had to look at the coffin text. So third millennium, first millennium. And so, in that sense, I would say I specialized in magical text over these periods. Only, of course, this is a lot of material, and if I have to translate and edit the text, then I'll focus on those of the first millennium. That's what I'm using also in my book right now on demons, on demonology.
Okay. Before I bring my brother Onk in, I want to ask you, how do you, I think you talk about Egyptomania. When I'm reading your profile, how do you look at Egyptomania in 2024? How do you look at it?
Yeah, so Egyptomania is actually the word that is used in the West to refer to fascination for ancient Egypt. And I created also a course at UC Berkeley on Egyptomania and reception history. But what I try, the way I see that is, it's actually a word that it sounds like negative, like a mania is an obsession, right? So, and this is what they use referring to Western Egyptomania, when the Europeans start to look at all these Egyptian mummified bodies, papyri, obelisks that were stolen and brought to Europe, mostly stolen, some of them also given as presents. And so there was this mania for Egypt, right? This obsession for Egypt. But the reception history of ancient Egypt goes beyond the West. I mean, it's everywhere in the world. So the fact that if you look at a book of Egyptomania today, you only read about Cleopatra's, white Cleopatra's, Egyptianizing architecture in London, or Egypt in the literature of mostly Western European authors. What I'm trying to do is to show that there is much more than that, and that especially in the US, we should talk much more about the reception of ancient Egypt in African American communities, for instance, in the Black visual arts. So that what I was trying to do at UC Berkeley is indeed look at local artists, musicians, how they feel about Egypt, what kind of inspiration is for them, and also authors. So there's so much. So I've been working a bit with some Afrofuturists, organized a little conference, and I met really amazing artists. By the way, actually, I have this T-shirt which is of a Californian artist and friend who unfortunately passed away too soon last year. His name is anyway Doran Dada, and I invite everybody to look at his website and at his work, which is amazing. He did some murals here in Berkeley, and the family is still running his shop, and is one of those brilliant minds who really help to make Egypt being still a source of inspiration for many people who also feel, of course, connected, because those are ancestors, right? Those are Africans, and it's just great. What, as a European, Italian, when I first came to California, I wasn't aware that there was so much Egypt everywhere in the streets, even outside university, on stands in the street, and you see ankh and amulets being sold, and then in hip hop music, jazz, there's so much Egypt. Writers, I could go on and on. It's really a source of inspiration. So that when you talk about reception history or Egyptomania, we should consider those phenomena too, right? So that's what I'm trying to do in my work on Egyptomania, like expand, since there is all this talk about decolonizing the discipline. I say, okay, well, this is a way, right? Just look at much more than Europe and the West.
Right. When you study the texts, because this is what was fascinating when I decided to email you. I was looking at how you look at the magic texts, the demonology, spells, those different things. It's fascinating studying them. Would it be difficult for someone to literally practice what the ancient Egyptians did? Could you see that in 2024, someone actually doing what the ancient Egyptians did, as far as the time periods, like even the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, or New Kingdom? Could you see somebody in California outside UC Berkeley saying, "Hey, this is me showing what the ancient Egyptians did in the past"?
Oh yeah, I didn't need to go outside even the university. I had a student who was a practitioner also of Kemetic religion, and I mean, in California, not only in California, they have groups and sort of communities with their cult places where they actually use also ancient Egyptian text. They perform rituals. I think it's beautiful. It's having the Egyptian religion is not just a religion of the past. It's still a living religion. That what makes it. I think it's a proof of the beauty and the actuality, modernity of the religion, of what they consider to be done according to math. So the concept of order, justice.
Yeah, I got you.
I mean, math is a principle that is still so important, right, in today's communities and social justice movements. So yeah, and there's the whole so-called Afrocentrism, Afrocentric scholars. I don't like to use that term much, but let's say how it is called. But they use the ancient Egyptian religion still a lot, right, in their work. So
Okay.
that's great.
All right. All right. Let me back up for a little bit. Let me get Brother Onken. And it's your turn, my brother.
I'd just like to hear a little bit more why you don't like to use that term. Was that a self-imposed term, Afrocentric, or did they actually come up? Did the African Americans come up with that term? Just curious.
Well, I think Afrocentricity is much better. So I was reading about Sheikh Anta Diop and Obenga, others. It makes more sense because all the ism, Afrocentric, it sounds almost a bit negative, like if it's even almost not scientific, right?
Okay.
And so it's the same when you say Eurocentrism. It's negative. Like it means to put something in the center. But in fact, we have many centers, right? So according to also these new anthropological theories of perspectivism, looking at more perspectives, and that doesn't mean that any perspective is wrong or right. It's from where you see the world, right? So I like much more to speak about Afrocentricity, considering like the study of African societies and their importance in the history of the world, and Egypt being part of that, of course, because Egypt is in Africa, although there have been too many attempts to take it out of Africa and making it look like almost Western civilization, but Egypt is African. So there are at the moment many efforts to bring back Egypt to Africa, also in departments. If you think still that Egyptology is always in departments of ancient Near Eastern studies, so Middle Eastern studies, and even at my university, UC Berkeley, we are in the same building with African American studies, but we are not connected. It's like we are really two different things. And I really talk like this should go together, right? And including Nubian studies, so the study of Nubia and Sudan, why this should be disconnected, like modern Sudan from ancient Sudan, right? So Nubia and Sudan. So, but things are changing, and so, for instance, also in my department, and now there is this need to think in a new perspective, what we call like global South. So, if you're studying the Middle East, how the Middle East relates to Africa, to, for instance, the whole history of Black Arabs, and how you connect that to the global South, to the idea of all what is the South of the world, which I think that's something that is really is going to be a new frontier of our studies. And I see students being very interested to go in that direction, which has to do a lot with geography. So really, geography is really important, the thinking about space and places in the space and where they are, and so how this influence even the way people have been thinking about themselves and the world.
Absolutely. So that takes me to an interesting question about anthropology. And I see that you're a curator at the Egyptology Hertz Museum of Anthropology. Okay. And so early field of anthropology was colonial anthropology. Egyptology was absolutely practiced scientific racism and promoted it and used it as a tool against indigenous people. So that field started off rough with racist terminology. For instance, Rosner referred to the Nubians as Negroes or black. So how far has the field came from that racist perspective dominated by men, European men, and the use of racialized terms to today? You kind of touched on it a little bit in your answer just now. Could you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, so definitely we don't use that terminology anymore. There has been a great effort still there is to really refresh our terminology and to open up a perspective of what was by tradition a colonial discipline to a different frame of understanding. And indeed, anthropology is really important because it gives us the theory, right? To give us theories to work on historical remains, on text, and so on. And I particularly like those new trends of Amazonian and South American anthropologists who talk about perspectivism. So indeed, having different perspectives, and so thinking that not only in my that's especially relevant for my work on demons, demonology. So not only human beings, but also other kind of living beings, even animals, have their own perspectives. And so, for instance, an example could be the fact that humans are afraid of wild animals, and so they consider them as prey. So the animal is the prey from their own perspective. They have to kill the dangerous animals. But in the eyes of a leopard, the human is a prey, right? So we should look also at the perspective of the leopard. This is one of the examples that one of those anthropologists, Descola, used in his work. But that would be maybe for another talk.
Okay.
Also, the idea of word making, so making different words, that is a philosophical concept by this philosopher Goodman, is now being used also in anthropology and archaeology. So being aware that there are different ways to think about the world and to make the words. And so when we look at remains from the past, we should not present just one vision or one interpretation, but being able to present different interpretations and even, accept different interpretations, because we don't know the ultimate truth. We can do just our best to interpret the past, right? But in the end, our interpretation, it's never really, it's never going to be like, okay, this was the real past. Probably this was a potential past.
Absolutely.
It's probably how it could have been, right? But how to have the ultimate answers, it's today there are so many claims about anything, like but in fact, maybe we should think that more than one claim may have been right at different periods in different areas, and there's not just one ultimate truth. I don't know. I hope I don't sound too esoteric with this.
No, because science always speaks in approximate, so I understand that. So you spoke of Theophile Banger, Shikanti Diop's, and you started to talk about bringing Egypt into its African perspective. How important is that today in Egyptology? Talking about Africa, I mean Egypt in its African context. How important is that?
Oh, it's very important, especially in the US, I would say. Yeah, because of course it's I think first of all, Egyptology, especially in the US, needs more Black scholars, more African Americans in the field.
Absolutely.
And this is happening slowly, maybe a bit too slowly, but and I always wonder why is that? Why I don't have many African American students?
Mm.
And I think it has to do anyway with campus climate, the fact that Egyptology has not been, it's never been seen as something that you can study then to have a career. That's difficult. So it's easier to maybe study something else. But on the other hand, I think it has to do also with the perception of Egyptologists being, in fact, all of them almost white and coming from those countries who've been colonizing the field. And so I can definitely understand this sort of not wanting to come to a class of Egyptologists that is being taught by a blonde woman with blue eyes, right? All the
Correct.
time, all the
Correct.
time. There should
Correct.
be some diversity. So we are working on that, and I can see more new hires in that direction, and that would be important because I think, again, speaking about perspective is the way I can tell you the story of Kemet. It's going to be different from the way an African American professor who has been who grew up in a different context than me in Italy could tell. So because he will be looking at different angles and maybe read different literature, secondary literature or primary literature about what they're teaching. So I'm definitely working about that, and I always enjoy conversations or debates with scholars, authors with different backgrounds who can really, I learn a lot, let's say, from different views. So things I will never think about it when I'm reading a text, while, maybe you would look at, but if you don't tell me, I will not know. I don't know if that's clear.
Correct, because each group of humans bring in a certain bias into research. Different ethnicities see the world through their perspective, and of course, it's important to get that. And so that's why I actually fight for scientific literacy and education. Hopefully, that African American students, Black Americans, will actually, do just that. Get into the field of Egyptology. It's important. For me, it's so important for you to see people that look like you in these fields so that you can begin to trust the field enough where you can actually see what the data is presenting. I don't actually think that the data is right because of the color of your skin. I think the data should be looked at for the data. What does the data say? But it's definitely important for African Americans to see men and women in the field, particularly women, because we talked about how the field of Egyptology in the beginning was just European white men and their perspective. So it's good to see, Rita, that you as a woman is actually in the field and you have this great perspective. I appreciate that. The community will be helped greatly from your perspective. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you. And I should just mention and shout out to my dear colleague and friend Solange Ashby.
Absolutely.
I don't you're familiar. She's a
Absolutely.
professor, at UCLA, and
Absolutely.
she's one of the voices really we need. Her works on Egyptian women and queens in Nubia as well is really important, and I'm so glad she's now in California. So because we are in the same University of California system. But that there should be more Solanges. We need more Solanges. Let's say that.
I totally agree with you on that, and it's important to even the playing field when studying African culture. in African cultural context. It's just important for these multiple voices to be heard. So I totally agree with you. Now I want you to go back and kind of explain. I don't want to say the word wrong. Afro. How did you say that word? Afro. 1 second. What's the word? Garfield, what was that? 1 second. 1 minute here.
Afrofuturism.
Yeah, Afrofuturism. I know you talked about the art and stuff. Yeah, Afrofuturism. I didn't want to butcher that word. That's an interesting word. I know you was talking about the art. That and that kind of, you kind of meshed that with the demons and the, I suggest everybody go to your playlist, right? You have a very interesting playlist there. What are you trying to capture with this Afrofuturism? What is the essence of what you're trying to capture with this?
Well, for me, I'm just first, so I like a lot jazz, jazz music, and also kind of experimental jazz from the 70s, and I started to listen to Sun Ra. I don't know if you're familiar with Sun Ra and the orchestra. So Sun Ra passed away in the 70s. His orchestra is still active. Maestro Marshall Allen from the orchestra is like, he celebrated his 100th birthday, so he's still active. And they tour a lot also on the East Coast. They were lately in San Francisco. But anyway, their music has been labeled as, Sun Ra has been labeled as a pioneer of Afrofuturism. And since I was working a lot of reception history of ancient Egypt, how ancient Egypt is a source of inspiration in Black visual arts and in music. So I've been helping also this exhibition of music, ancient Egypt and music from the African diaspora in the Netherlands, in Leiden. That was on show last year. So looking at Sun Ra, the name also inspired to the sun god of ancient Egypt, I started to read about Afrofuturism, and I got in touch with some authors and artists who been defined as Afrofuturists or work on that, especially Yetasha Womack from Chicago, who wrote a book on Afrofuturism. And so the term Afrofuturism is also debated because it's been coined by a critic, a literature critic, Mark Derry, who actually is not an African American man. He's a white man who was looking at those African American productions in music and art. And so he started to talk about how there were these ideas of a Black futures inspired many artists. And so there is a song by Mos Def that says at a certain point, Black to the future. So in this famous essay, Mark Derry has been talking a lot about that. And then the word became used also by some music critics from the UK, Kosho Edun, and others. So there are a lot of books by now about Afrofuturism, and it is always connected to ideas of a Black futures, where the future, though, and this is what interested me, I found it really fascinating, the future is connected to the ancient past. So Egypt plays a role as well. So you'll see in their art, in some album covers of musical vinyls, you see a lot of Egyptian symbols there. And the Black Panther, for instance, is considered one of the expressions of Afrofuturism. Well, this ancient civilization in Africa is actually connected to the future. So it's not something I I'm an expert about. What I've been trying to look at is how ancient Egypt is connected, is
Okay.
used in that, right? And the whole movement. Some other authors been talking about African futurism and not Afrofuturism, thinking
Okay.
like Afro is kind of offensive in a sense. So they say African futurism, and
Okay.
you can find a lot about that. And it's still going on, the whole discussion, but definitely I think what is important is to see how ancient Egypt again is a source of inspiration, and that's something that you can find in all Black visual arts, also outside Afrofuturism. There is always a lot of Egypt, and so that's what I was looking at, since when we
Okay.
talk about Egyptomania, otherwise it's always connected to the West. So white Cleopatra's Egyptianizing architecture in Europe, as well as in the US, and authors, Western authors who've been using ancient Egypt in their work. But what about, how Egypt has been, and it is still so lively in the life and work and art of African Americans and African authors?
Absolutely. That's interesting. So I know you teach a course in Egyptology and interdisciplinary studies at San Quentin. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
That's admirable, going to the prison system and
Thank
teach
you.
this. That's very admirable. And so, how important? One, two parts to it. How important is interdisciplinary studies for Egypt? So sometimes people will just take one item. Well, I read the glyphs, and this is the answer. And how important is adding other disciplinary studies to actually reach your conclusions when you're dealing with Egyptology?
Okay, so I think I would separate the two. So interdisciplinary, so taking other fields in your
Yes.
fields in order to
Yes.
also work together. It's something that I do also at university, in the sense that, okay, in order to understand the ancient Egyptian religion, I think it's useful to compare with other religions. So
Okay.
I'm talking with scholars of religious studies, for instance, or in order to share all what I'm studying and making it accessible to people, I use technology. And so I use methods of what we call digital humanities, 3D visualization, VR reconstructions, and so on. So this is the interdisciplinary word, anthropology, right? Using anthropology in my work. What I do at San Quentin State Prison, and by the way, now it's not a prison anymore, it's called the Rehabilitation Center, because
I changed the name.
Newsom, the California word, is really trying to make it as a sort of progressive space of rehabilitation.
Okay.
And there are many educational programs, including the one for which I work, Mount Tamalpais College, which is a higher education program. And for me, it's my way to give back to society, and to bring Egyptology in communities where otherwise there would be anything. It's true, I teach there also courses of comparative religion, anthropology, writing, but definitely teaching Egyptology there is the most inspiring experience ever, because I found amazing, brilliant students. Many of my students are actually African Americans, which are not a minority there. African Americans are a minority at UC Berkeley, but not at San Quentin.
Interesting.
And, so, and many of them are artists, and they use Egypt in their art. And so they were also inspired by my course, because they could have more material for their art. So all that has been really enriching for me. Talking again about different perspectives. Many of my students at San Quentin are Muslims or Christians. They're anyway very religious, so they know the Bible very well.
Okay.
they start to learn about ancient Egypt from the Bible. And
Yes.
so even discussing what is Egypt in the Bible and what we learn about Egypt from archaeology or from translating the Egyptian text. And so, what about these narratives? Can we say that, oh, what the Bible says is the truth, or shall we questioning it? Right? That's very challenging to do with believers, right? So it's been an interesting, challenging experience, but that I'm continuing, and I really do believe in the function of higher education, education in general, in prison, and really return citizens, those that are able to get out. They should have then the chance to continue their education. So with this higher education program, you can actually, when you get out from prison, you can actually enroll in UC Berkeley or another university. So
That's interesting. You said it's hard to get across when you talking to believers, when you read talking about Egypt. Yeah, because I think those early explorers that they went into Egypt and found that Egypt was actually older than their religion itself, and that definitely caused a problem.
Yeah, but even I don't know if you know that in my course of Egyptomania, indeed, I showed the students how in Europe around 500, it's like and then later 600, so during also the Renaissance, they were creating these fake monuments with fake hieroglyphs, and they were translating these hieroglyphs according to their Christian mentality. So saying that those were the words of the Christian God. So it's kind of sounds almost funny today, right? They were like really making up the whole story about hieroglyphs and how they should be read as a symbols, right? So,
you know what? We just had a conversation on the platform about that. It was a young lady came on and talked about how the hieroglyphs was actually the Egyptians was the Hebrews. And the Hebrews come from being Egyptians, and that the writing that was on the walls was coming from the Hebrew God. I was like, that's no. And it's funny that you actually bring that up. And that's a whole nother conversation unto itself. So I got one more question for you, because I know you're short on time. When at I'm not sure how much available data you've studied on the formation of Egypt, but I would like to ask a very simplistic question. In terms of what you ran across on ancient Egypt, was it multiple polities on the Nile Valley that would later on form the Egyptian state, or was it one polity in Egypt that would form the Egyptian state? I'm not even going to talk about the Middle East, because I only want to talk about that. I just want to talk about the African origins of Egypt.
Well, from what we found, it looks like there were kings from the south who at a certain point enter in a fight, in relationship and fights with the kings from the north. And so first there were two states, and then they were unified in one state. And so I don't know if you know this famous object, the Narmer.
Yes.
Palette. So that's used to try to see this legendary king as the unifier. There are a lot of new excavations, though. They're trying to learn more about these early kings, because we have the list of the later authors of kings' names, but we are not even sure, that's really the complete list. And sometimes you can see in the news like, oh, maybe new king from Abydos, from the south.
Okay.
The name of a new king has been found, or this king from about whom we knew nothing now. We found, so it's still on. I think it's a research still ongoing.
I'm going to research. Okay. So when you say in the South, do you mean South in Khartoum or South in Egypt? What do you mean? Well,
That's generally the sites that have been mostly excavated and explored are in the south of Egypt. So yeah, Abydos,
I got you.
that area south of Luxor.
Okay.
And of course, Nubia, ancient Sudan, has all a history also of,
Yeah,
things.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Mm.
they since prehistory. So that's
Yeah,
they
so
were developing at the same time. And
absolutely. One more question. So can we safely say that the Nubians created a civilization and the Egyptians created a civilization? And should we ever confuse those two? I think it's more for me. You know what? I don't even want to interject that. Go ahead. Is these two separate civilizations?
I mean, there has been an colonization, Egyptianization of Nubia by
Yes.
Egypt.
Mhm.
I think you guys, if you're interested, you should interview my colleague Stuart Tyson Smith. It's been
Second time we've been saying we should talk to him.
yeah,
We
because
want to interview him.
he's been spending his own life actually researching the Egypt, the Nubia and the Egyptianization. In Nubia, he goes there, excavate there, and if you look also at his articles, he has a lot of interesting material to show how Nubia was an independent and amazing civilization at a certain point connected to Egypt, and that's a lot also of what we call entanglement.
Cultural entanglement, absolutely.
So we talk a lot about entanglement right now when looking at Egypt and Nubia. Definitely, I believe that today we really need more Nubian studies departments, more Nubian studies integrated in Egyptological department, because for too long Nubian studies have been seen as a sort of secondary field.
Yes.
Like you first have to learn about Egypt.
Correct.
And that's wrong. That's completely wrong.
I agree with you 100%. And so guess where I seen that video at by Tyson Stewart Smith on your page, on your playlist. Yes, that's an excellent video right there. I watched it. That's an excellent video.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's working. There are more people who work on Nubia all over the world. Even in Europe, Nubian studies now is big. They have conferences. There's a lot going on in Europe as well. There are amazing excavations. Unfortunately, it's one of those areas nowadays that are being affected by horrible wars.
Correct.
Human suffering, and that's really a pity also for for taking care of their heritage, protecting the heritage, making sure that archaeological sites will not be looted and ruined. So it's a real problem right now. And we are all hoping that what is going on in Sudan will end soon.
Okay.
All right. On the screen, we have the Oxford Handbook of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And you edited this. This is something pretty recent. Am I correct?
Yeah, it was published last year, although it's been a volume that took a long time to edit because it has many contributions, many authors. So the project was born actually when I was still living in Germany before coming to California, so at the University of Bonn. And indeed, the co-editor is a German professor who works a lot also on the Book of the Dead from the University of Würzburg, Martin Stadler.
Let me ask you this: when you look at the beliefs in the afterlife, right? You talk about gods in ancient Egypt and so forth. What do you think is one of the most unique things that they did in that process that you just haven't seen replicated by other cultures, or you just haven't seen it outside of the Egyptian text?
Oh, nice question. Um, I never saw so much creativity and I would say really art, piece of art produced for not being seen. This is something I never saw nowhere. If you think that those amazing papyri and tomb decorations that all speak about the protection of the dead weren't supposed to be seen. And today they are exposed in museums,
Oh man.
they're online, they're everywhere. But the tombs weren't supposed to be open. This was just for the deceased to be seen and was intended as a guide, as a help to go through the regions of the beyond of the netherworld. All these cute, nice images and all these amazing hieroglyphs that are made with so much care. Those scribes were amazing guys. I mean, we have also clumsy scribes, of course, but the care of putting together so much for the dead, but not because of showing up, oh, I'm the artist who did that, right? The artists in ancient Egypt, they didn't even sign their art. So art as a function that was beyond aesthetic enjoyment. And this I did not see it nowhere else. So
What about the demonology? You talked
sorry,
about.
I could not hear you.
Okay. What about demonology? You talk about that a lot. What is so significant about demonology within the paradigm of the ancient Egyptian culture?
Yeah, so currently I'm finishing my book on ancient Egyptian demonology, but I wrote also a lot of articles. It's been one of my favorite topics since years now, and I'm fascinated from the fact that beside having many gods, all represented, personified in animals and trees and even sometimes objects. Definitely, when you start to read those magical texts, you realize that they were also believing in spirits of the dead, in ghosts, or in sort of what I call now agents, like some supernatural powers who are not gods, though. They are not gods, are worshipped. They have temples on earth, right? They appear in myths. Those are presence that are not worshipped, but they interact with humans. They are called, they are summoned up by magicians. They are feared. And in many cases, they are seen as depending from the gods. So an angry god can send you some demons on earth to punish you. So the plague was a demon, right? So
Okay.
this demonization of illness. And I thought this is so actual. This is actually what is believed also in many other societies, ancient and moderns. But Egyptologists for too long have been only focusing on main gods, Osiris, Ra, Hathor, Anubis, and so on. And I thought, like, we need someone to write about those demons. And I use this word, demon in English sounds negative, sounds like the devil, sounds like the bad guys. But actually, the English demon comes from the ancient Greek daimon. And the daimon, even in ancient Greece, was a spirit. It could be also a personal spirit, a presence connected to you spiritually, and not necessarily bad. And so in my book, I talk a lot about how we have benevolent and malevolent demons. The benevolent ones are guardians, are protectors, and they look scary, but because they have to scare the bad guys. And so there is this, this is used in many magical traditions. If you want to ward off the bad stuff, the danger, the scary one, you have to be scary too, right?
Oh man, like a horror movie. I can't.
Right. So they have knives. These guardians have knife, or they hold snakes. Apart from the fact, I really like the aesthetics of these figures. It's just I love these kind of figures. So they look scary, but they are good. They are protecting their space. They are protecting the deceased. They are protecting the mummified body. That's why they appear on the coffins. They are encounters of the dead. When he starts to travel in the netherworld, he meet them. He has to know the name. He has to know how to talk to them. So that's why you have the magical spells. And so, yeah, that's what I'm writing about, and I have a lot of fun writing about those. I think they're great, and great figures, great powerful text related to those demons. But again, demons are not all bad. Many of them are actually good guys, and that's connected to also spirits of the dead, and the idea of the ancient Egyptians that basically once you arrive at the final judgment, if you recite this negative confession, so you say, I did not commit any sin, and that's also very actual, then you will be beatified, you will become a god yourself. But if you didn't, or if you had no chance to do that, so if your tomb was destroyed, you could end up in a sort of Egyptian hell. It's a place of punishment, and we see those represented, those damned dead called the Mutu. They are tied up. They can be drawn in those bodies of water, and you have those scary goddesses that are taking care of that. So these are all those scenes in tombs that I also work on.
Okay. On the screen, I have your book, another book you edited, Ancient Egypt, New Technology, the Present and Future of Computer Visualization, Virtual Reality, and Other Digital Humanities in Egyptology. It seems like you're moving 2020, 2025, or 2026 and beyond. You're moving to a new age of trying to have all these documents on 3D and all that stuff, so people could have visualize it in a modern day type of way. Did you enjoy doing this, and where do you see this going, and will this help us to understand ancient Egyptian culture better?
Oh yeah, well, it's really the digital revolution, right? I talk like, why Egyptologists have to be always so ancient, so conservative, that we should open up to the new technology and share widely, because even those Egyptological books that you can find in a library, they're not really accessible to everyone. I mean, a lot of people cannot go to the library, or definitely they cannot buy those books because they're super expensive. And so digitizing is a way to make everything accessible, because all those monuments, all those texts, they do not belong to us. They do not belong to the museums where we work. They're an Egyptian heritage, and we could say culturally they're the heritage of the world. They're the heritage of all the people who come from there, who are connected to Egypt somehow, or because of their ancestors. And so they have the right to know, to see. And so what I like of the new technology is that you can really make that easily accessible. And that's why I also work a lot for, I think everything should be open access. There should be no barriers. All the digitization should be free to access, and our work on it, our translations, our study, it should be all online available. And the 3D technology, I think, is really nice, because indeed you have an idea of the object in the space, and so it's not the flat 2D photo. And even when you have a 2D a photo, it's all about the perspective of the photograph of the photographer. So from where he took that photo, why, what he wanted to show, but what is on the back of that monuments that the photo didn't show. And instead, with the 3D on Sketchfab, for instance, you can flip around the whole object. You can look at it as you want, whatever you're interested in. And it gives you a sense of space. And there is a discourse also very important of kind of heritage preservation through digitization, because many of these monuments are in places where maybe one time they will get lost, they will not be there anymore. I'm talking also of monuments outside Egypt. And so by digitizing, at least you create a record that will be there forever in case that monument will be lost. And as well as you can use also this technology as a protest, considering that Egypt is claiming to have back a lot of items that are still in Europe, in the US. And then the new debate is like, well, you could get the 3D print of this, give us the original, right? Or there was some artists in Germany have been creating a 3D print of the bust of Nefertiti, Queen Nefertiti, and they brought it back to Egypt and they buried in the sand. That was an act, and they filmed the whole thing. There was an act of protest to say, this is where Nefertiti belongs. So you can do so much with the new technology. And besides 3D now, virtual reality, augmented reality, I use it a lot in my classes. You can have, virtual tours in virtual space. And then there is the new frontier of AI, artificial intelligence, where we still don't know where we will end up with that. But definitely, I think the most positive thing of that is that you really open up to sharing, accessing everything to everyone. We are working a lot also now for making those digital works accessible also for people who are impaired or have some difficulties normally to even watch a video, but there are new technologies even for that. So I think that's great. It's the good side of it, of technology, and I'm glad to say that especially in California, there is a really great movement of Black tech, and they're really doing so much for making possible this new future, where it becomes almost a philosophy, thinking in terms of a virtual world that is actually helping us to understand the real world better.
Okay. Hey, I want to say, do you have a last question or anything?
No, it sounded like when we went back to the demon part of it, sounded like them Egyptians was very religious and spooked out.
Hey, Rita Lucarelli, I want to say thank you for taking out the time, and it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure having you on. You did a great job. You taught us a lot about this demonology stuff. And hey, shout out for keeping the ancient Egyptians alive, man. Now they're having in 3D and visual, new technology. Hey, they're doing the thing.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you for having this show, this YouTube channel, and your work is very important to educate and share information with the larger communities. We need more people like you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, I'd like to say and shout out to understanding Egyptian civilization and its African context. It's important for the community to recognize that. And thank